basically I'm looking for the 60-second elevator version of what you bring to the table, and what are the issues. I want just the listing of the issues, and then we'll come back to them. What we'll probably find is there's some common themes, and then we'll come back to those. Jeff.
Thanks. You know, it's about making the Alameda County Office of Ed transparent and a functioning agency. The county office is there to provide services to school districts, and unfortunately we've seen a lot of those services diminish over the years. I want to use my background at all levels of education to build credibility with school boards, superintendents, and principals to restore those services to those school districts. And additionally, with the local control funding formula and LCAP, it's very critical to have credibility with school board members and superintendents, because as you oversee that plan, it's imperative that you work with them in advance of their submission of the plan and help to modify that. It's the bully pulpit. After you veto the plan, it goes off to the state, so the key to be able to influence for our most needy and vulnerable students is to make sure that you have built those relationships with those stakeholders, which I have.
For me, the key issues...
Give me 1 second.
I'm sorry.
Let me catch up now. And then
okay.
I just have to learn to talk faster.
That's okay.
You should get a reporter on that.
Because they've been training us to talk faster, so yeah.
You know, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I've had 22 years in education, and those range from being a teacher all the way to a district office administrator, principal, and faculty and supervisor at the Cal State East Bay at the university level. The issues that I see in Alameda County right now, first of all, are providing more oversight to districts. That oversight is in the area, certainly, of funding, with local control funding, as well as the implementation of the Common Core state standards. I also see a big issue in Alameda County around the rates of recidivism for our students in juvenile hall. And finally, I see that we need a new and better advocate at the state level to really be a proponent for our kids throughout the county. You ready for me?
Yeah. I'm warming up. My fingers are warming up. I'm catching
Good,
up.
good. All right. If you've read my website, then you probably know my bio. I have done teaching, school administration, training of teachers, consulting, and school board trustee, K-12 and beyond. My platform is based on conducting a needs assessment across Alameda County to find out exactly what the needs are for all stakeholders as far as students from pre-K through community college level. I'm very concerned about using economies of scale, and the reason I say that is because as far as health benefits are concerned, they are consuming all people in education, because Alameda County has not used economies of scale to bring those costs down and make them like Fresno Unified, where they've stayed steady since 2007. Also, I would like to host dynamic, nationally recognized...
Let me just sorry for interrupting you.
Sure.
Let me just ask you one quick question, because I saw that in your material, and the question that jumped out at me that I wanted to sort of ask you that while I'm thinking of it. Is there not a central, through CalSTRS or somewhere, option for health benefits for school districts?
It's CalPERS is one of them.
CalPERS, but not for the teachers, right?
Well, that's for everybody in education. The problem is that if you are a district that uses CalPERS, no other group, no other broker will talk to you unless you resign. Give a year's resignation and say in a year we are leaving CalPERS. They won't even talk to you about rates. So what you need to do is you really need economies of scale. The superintendent needs to get all those district superintendents together and say, listen, if 70,000 kids in Fresno can keep their rates at the 2007 levels, what could we do with 220,000? Oh, absolutely. Okay. But we can't get out of it unless we know what the rates are.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay,
I'm
and
sorry.
so
I just wanted to understand what that was about.
Yeah, and then, so professional development is something that I definitely want to improve on. I would like to host dynamic job-alike meetings that each person, say a director of curriculum instruction, gravitates to, because ACOE becomes a think tank of the best practices and best ideas, and of course outreach. I can tell you a little bit more about the survey that I've put out. The results have been absolutely dramatic, and it tells us that there are lots of folks in education that have no idea what ACOE does for the county.
Karen?
So Karen Monroe, I'm the current associate superintendent at Alameda County Office of Ed, and there are three things that I'm focusing on with my campaign and currently with the work. The first one being this idea of excellent preparation for teachers. So professional development, much of what we've begun doing now and are building on. So we provide professional development for the Common Core, for the new assessments, for also for LCAP in a much more targeted way, so the Local Control Accountability Plan. And we are working with 15 out of our 18 districts on Common Core training and have been recognized for that work we are doing by being invited to apply for a large grant, a $5 million grant, to be one of the county offices in the state leading for this work. The second thing is this concept of readiness. So really focusing on student readiness, and that ranges from preschool.
Sorry about that.
That's
They
okay.
wanna
I'm
share
trying.
their- They want to share their music with
It's a
you.
little. It's great.
okay.
Adds a baseline to my message. So starting with preschool, so kindergarten readiness, preschool for all, and moving to the other end of the spectrum, which is readiness for college and career. So one of the things that we're doing with that now is making sure that the students who need it the most, many of the students who are court involved, are juvenile justice involved, and are in our community schools, are getting job opportunities. And we've given so far 74 internships and are looking to do another 25 by the next term. The third thing is deep supports for our districts. So that's both fiscal and academic around the LCAP. So providing the supports districts need to create the plans that are now being required that speak to both the academic plans the districts have and how the funding is going to be aligned with those plans. So we're meeting with districts twice a month to work on this. We are having teams come from each of the districts, and we're providing technical assistance around this. And we've always provided fiscal support around AB 1200, and in the last 2 years I'm sorry to have used that. That's AB 1200 is what gave counties the
Richmond bankruptcy.
purview over fiscal purview over the 18 school districts. So it's been about 18.
Now I know the enabling legislation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those, I believe that providing that high level of support is crucial. We actually exist to power the goals of the districts and to help them really identify a solid plan for making sure that they stay fiscally and academically healthy.
Ursula.
Okay, Ursula Reed, and I'm running for this office coming out of 6 years working in San Leandro as a city council person and 26 years working in education. I've worked on all levels. I've worked as a teacher, as an administrator. I was a principal for 5 years, vice principal for 3 years. I've worked at the district level many years, totaling 26 years. I am a parent, and I have seen and worked and tried to use Alameda County for a resource. I am concerned right now about Alameda County and the service they give not only to the 18 school districts, but also to the juveniles in Alameda County. This office is to work with education for our kids that are in juvenile hall, are at Camp Sweeney, our juveniles that are in all of our alternative programs for the county. I'm really concerned because right now tax dollars do go to our programs, And a lot of the kids that are in those programs, we have the recidivism rate that is 70%. So after being in juvenile hall for one-time offense, it's 70% guaranteed they'll be back in within 2 to 3 years. I'd like to change that statistic, work with private agencies and agencies around our county to mentor and help our juveniles and try to show them a different way of life so that they have a different perspective.
Okay. So, what I'd like you guys, folks, to do, one of the things that we, as you might imagine, consider a rather important role of the office is the fiscal oversight role.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with you, Ursula, tell me what are the things you're looking for when, or would be looking for in fiscal oversight?
Fiscal oversight, I would be looking, well, as you just said, all the different districts submit their budgets to the county office, and then we are the ones that are the stopgap before it goes to the state. I'd be looking to make sure that they had within their budgets enough of a percentage that they put aside for times of uncertainty, and then enough of a percentage to pay if they say go through labor negotiations and tell a union, oh, we're going to give you a 3% raise, if they actually have that amount of money in order to give that raise over time. I do not want any district within the county to go into receivership. This would be the place where we would stop and make sure that doesn't happen. I also would be making sure with the LCAP, the local control funding, that the money that comes down from the state for the students that are eligible to receive that funding, I want to make sure they have an oversight plan so that when they put the plan into motion and it's approved, that the money does definitely follow those students instead of go anywhere else. So I want to make sure that they have an oversight.
Okay, thanks. Karen?
Yeah.
One of the most important things that we do as the County Office of Ed is have relationships with our districts and our 18 superintendents. So we convene the 18 superintendents monthly, as well as the heads of business and the heads of IT, et cetera. One of the key issues surrounding those meetings is, one, of course, making sure that there's a dissemination of information, but two, making sure that we understand what the landscape is in each district. So we are meeting with districts on a continual basis. We're communicating with them on a continual basis. I often pick up the phone to talk to an associate superintendent or a superintendent. That's certainly the superintendent's role. So it is our role between quarterly reports to know exactly what's going on in the district.
Yeah, but here's my question. My question is, as you're looking at and doing fiscal review, what are the key things you're looking for?
Okay. Let me say one more thing leading up to that. Because one of the issues is that our districts are not on the same fiscal system. So that involves the way we look at the budgets. We get our quarterly reports. But what we are now working on is a system by which all districts can be on the same financial system, making it easier for us to look at each district's budget between those reports. So what I would be looking at is a lot of what we're talking about around the LCAP right now. I would be looking at what districts are prioritizing both with their goals and with the corollary funding. So are you providing the services that you are mandated to provide for those populations that have been identified under the Local Control Accountability Plan or the in LCFF? So that means, are you making sure that you're prioritizing the needs fiscally of English language learners? Do you have discernibly plans to improve your services to foster youth? How are you elevating the needs of your students of poverty? So those are the things we're going to be looking at with increased scrutiny as we move forward with the plan. And yes, there are, we have a checklist that our budget department looks at to make sure that there are appropriate reserves, to make sure that basic principles of accounting have been followed, that there are no deficit, there's appropriate cash on hand. Those sorts of things we will continue to look at and advise districts on and work with them to make sure they're compliant in those areas.
Great, thank you.
So first of all, I want to tell you that I have my CBO certification, among other things, so that the state of California has awarded me a Chief Business Official certification through the state of California. I want to just tell you quickly that having crafted an answer to this question, I would like to say that it's commonly known that in Oakland and other Alameda County districts, the fiscal difficulties have been there even before the previous economic downturn. So despite being fully aware of the history of that, I do not believe that ACOE did their due diligence in making sure that prior to these deficiencies, they were aware of what was coming in each of the districts, such as Oakland, that has failed. So one of the things that I would strongly stress is that long before the second interim report comes out, that we at the county office know exactly what's going on, that we've made close connections to each of the business officials in the districts to make sure that they have their at least their 3% reserves, and it should really, it should be higher than that, making sure that the designated monies that are earmarked for certain things are only being used for those things. One of the things that I feel that that districts have told me that they've complained about is they felt as though ACOE should have provided a really clear roadmap to doing LCAP, to addressing LCAP. But it's like too little too late. It should have preceded it. Instead, it's kind of playing catch up. And so there's things that I think are very important that ACOE needs to be the leader. They need to know the best practices. They need to be the conduit to Sacramento to make sure that everything that's going on fiscally is accurate.
Let me ask this silly question, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but haven't we only just now gotten the standards for how LCAP is going to be implemented?
It was improved in March.
Right. So I'm not quite sure what ACOE should have done. We're in April. The state board just approved this, did they not? What would you have had them do before then?
So there are organizations such as School Services and other organizations across the state that actually anticipate these things because they're part of the conversation that's going on. Districts have already moved forward before the decisions were made because they knew what was coming. I'm a school board member. I've known about a lot of the details of LCAP because of the updates that we've been getting for months. So because it hasn't necessarily been finally acted upon, it doesn't mean that it's not coming and that we don't prepare for it. And one of the things that I think is important for ACOE to do is to make us aware, help us do that. Say these are some of the choices we may be able to make, think about it, so that you're not caught off guard and now the decision's made, now hurry up and figure out what you want to do.
So now with the LCAP in place, really the oversight provided by the superintendent around budgets has broadened. So not only is it the responsibility of the superintendent to be sure that obviously basic accounting principles are met, that our districts have reserves that are appropriate, as well as are providing mandated services. But really, if you back up, what the superintendent is also supposed to be overseeing when looking at budgets now is that first and foremost, the community has had input into the budgeting process. So that's another check and balance that's in place now. We would expect to see that community meetings have been held. Boards of education are more heavily involved in the budget processing, as well as parents and teachers. We want to be sure that when the LCAP is written and approved and put on and approved by the board, that those funding streams are appropriate to the students that are being serviced. So we're going to be looking very closely at what types of monies and services are going to our English learner students, as well as our special ed students, our students who are performing below basic. we want to be sure that that funding is in place and that those programs are actually implemented. In order to do that, we need to take a step back, and we need to be sure that appropriate staff is in place at the county office in order to make those oversight conversations happen.
Thanks. Well, the county's kind of been asleep at the wheel for a while, and part of that is really directly engaging with the school districts. As I talk with superintendents, they do feel a disconnection between the county office of ed and services that they need, so that a lot of them don't feel it's really necessary to have the county office of ed. Having said that, the key aspect, and it sounds like I'm the only one that's actually gone through this process of the first, second, and then interim budgets as well as the final. The key thing in this has to do with the multi-year projection.
They feel a disconnection between the service that they need and, I'm sorry.
And the services being offered from the county office of ed.
Just trying to work around the motorcycles. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Under AB 1200, a couple of things are required. Districts are required to submit their budget. They're also required to submit a multi-year projection. But the key thing is in the notes. It's in the assumptions. A district which will remain nameless, I was at their budget adoption of their second interim, and the CBO assumed or had built into his assumptions that the teachers are going to take a 5% pay cut. And after the meeting, I said, wow, that's amazing. You were able to negotiate a 5% pay cut. He says, well, no, we haven't. And I said, well, how can you submit that? He goes, well, I'll get a side letter from the teachers union. That kind of stuff just makes for shaky assumptions. And so it's very important to look at the detail. It's one of the reasons why the superintendent does approve all of the collective bargaining agreements that are and take a look at the multi-year projection. Are you good for this current year, the subsequent year, and the third year out? So it's very important to look at the details. One of the things, though, I'm very concerned about with local control funding formula, it takes all the categoricals out of being bucketized, make up a word there, and now it's on the bargaining table. So in those districts that benefit from the higher dollars that they're going to receive with the concentration grants, there's a potential for some volatility depending on what the governor and the legislature approves on the percentages of their funding. So those districts are really at risk if they have a high concentration and a high dollar. Sure. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me back up.
I'm sorry.
I thought you were familiar. So
yeah, I am somewhat, but you sort of lost me. Go ahead.
So all districts have a base, and then they get supplemental based on their free and reduced lunch, as well as their English language learners.
Right.
Then they get concentration grants above 55%. So districts are required to maintain a minimum of 3% reserve.
Right.
We know that we all have the same baseline. Above that is this variable number. This year the governor funded about 12%. He's forecasting 28% of that gap. And the idea is we'd be at 100% by 2021. So if the legislature approves less than or doesn't fund it at all, those districts who are receiving those additional dollars are going to be at risk. So it's going to be difficult for them to build in those added reserves to be able to accommodate the fluctuations that we may have within the budget. So it's very important that those districts have a plan, a local plan. It's going to be different for every district, but they need to make sure they engage their community, and the county superintendent needs to be engaged all the way through the process so there are no surprises at the end. The other piece that I'm concerned about is a potential accounting change having to do with accrued liabilities as it relates to other post-benefit employments, other post-employment benefits. And there is an opportunity, depending on those who are using CalPERS, there may be a significant increase in what that accrued liability may be. GASB is still working through that, but school districts don't report their accrued liabilities like companies do. So in summary, other post-employment benefits are going to be a key factor in their fiscal health. Short-term and long.
Well, let me ask each again. We'll start following along this line. We'll start with the benefit just to mix it up here. There is going to be, all of your districts have basically 2, potentially 3 liability, unfunded liabilities, correct? What's the?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Unpaid liability.
The three key unpaid retirement liabilities, right?
Most,
Cap, stirs, PERS, what was the third thing you said?
PERS and an OPEB liability.
It's gonna be your retiree healthcare benefits.
That are already retired.
Okay. Tell me, give me your understanding of what's going to happen in the coming years to those liabilities. And what should you be on the lookout for, and how will that affect their budgets in the future?
Well, certainly, what the county superintendent needs to be on the lookout for, along with the relationship she's built at the districts through the budgeting process, is the rate of retirements at our districts. So we're going to want to look closely when we talk about projections. We want to look at the workforce to see, where the teachers are in each of the individual unions and what the retirement rate looks like coming up. I would say that there's some opportunities for the county office to help support those budget projections, certainly, and to help districts better plan so that we don't have, districts like Oakland, Emeryville before them, Hayward on the brink of, going into receivership. So I think certainly the county is well poised to provide support and oversight, but it's going to come with a lot of planning and a lot of discussion.
So what do you think will happen to those retirement liabilities in the future?
Well, I think they're going to encroach upon the budget. I mean, I think the costs are going to go up so high that, we're going to see some really imbalanced, upside down budgets. I don't know what else to say. I think it's going to, and it could happen very quickly.
Do you think that's true because?
I think that's true because we have a teaching force right now that is getting up there in years, and we have districts who have many people right now who are teaching in their late 50s, early 60s.
So my concern is who's driving this bus, and what I mean by that is that we at the county level, or even at the district level, will probably be reacting to what the state decides to do about this. I say that in terms of what piece we can play is advocacy. Alameda County could arbitrarily say, we're going to do this, and the state could come right along and say, no, you're not. You're doing it the way we're saying you need to do it, and you're going to have to follow our lead.
The state decides to play with regard to which liabilities?
And how to address them.
Which liabilities?
It could be all three. So in other words, you've got your retirees, you've got CalPERS, you've got CalSTRS, all of which are presenting problems. So is this going to be, and I can't predict the future, but what I'm saying is, where could we play a part? We can't necessarily arbitrarily say, in our county, this is what we're going to do, and to heck with the rest of you, because I think the state could overrule that. So then what do? Well, let's make sure that we have a voice in Sacramento that is a part of this, that we are working with school services, that we're working with VCMAT, that we're working with the legislature to make sure that we are a part of that communication and the decision-making process. I think that's one of the best things that we could do. And that's what I say is that we can pretend we have the controls. I'm relatively sure we don't.
Okay, so let me ask you, just to rephrase the question, this is really the question I'm asking, and I think what I asked is, what's going to happen to these three retirement liabilities in the future, and what are the implications for your districts?
Okay, they're going to get worse. That's going to need to be addressed. It's sort of like climate change. And eventually, when it gets to be serious enough, then there's going to need to be advocacy for it. There's going to need to be a think tank environment that works towards solving this problem. And I don't think we can do it in isolation. I do think one other thing, and that is that I mentioned to you about for instance, benefits. If we can start tightening up on things like that, where the organizational or the nexus of ACOE helps to take money down there, that gives us more money for other things. So I think that needs to be a constant focus, that we are not splurging on things that unnecessarily when there isn't that much money to go around.
Actually, I know we often come from different perspectives, but I don't disagree with my colleague on this one. I do believe that our highest value as the county office in this is advocacy, because this is not a decision that we're going to make. This is a decision we're going to need to respond to. And we're going to need to help our districts figure out how to respond to this as best they can. There are tough decisions already being made and tougher decisions that will need to be made. I met recently with Rob Bonta, who is co-sponsoring a bill with Speaker Perez, for STRS, looking at what some solutions are. So everybody right now is being asked to take a hit. So the state is being asked to contribute more. They've been historically contributed 3%. They've been asked to increase that. Of course, employees all along the way have been asked to contribute a higher percentage than they are currently. And districts also. So right now, everybody's come to the table. There's consensus that something needs to be done. There's the will to do it, but the prevailing wisdom is once we get in the weeds, that's when we're going to find out who actually is going to step up to give more. Everybody obviously is advocating to save as many resources as possible. So really our highest use is advocacy at the state level, which is no small feat and no small voice because we're Alameda County, and helping districts to navigate the reality. So I don't know that I have a specific answer to that yet, but I actually was surprised to see how little the state contributes, and I'm talking STRS because that's what I'm more familiar with. So that I'll be interested to see how pushing on that front, what change that makes. Because I feel like there's a smaller shift that's going to happen on the backs of employees, if you will, and districts are, not going to be made whole fiscally for many years to come. So it seems as though looking to see what moves are being made at the state as we receive more revenue at the state level will be what I want to see.
Thanks. Ursula, your favorite topic mentions in
Yes, it is. So I don't disagree, as Karen stated, with what has already been said. I do know that CalSTRS has been moving toward asking for more of a percentage of compensation going out from the employees' pockets versus them putting in. I also know that the state is pretty much
more of a percentage of compensation. Say that again. I didn't understand this.
Okay, so they're asking for the employees to put in more into CalSTRS than they have in the past. The state, though, is pretty much at the wheel of this one, and I think that it is going to take advocacy from the county level to speak with the state and to make sure that that conversation is open for us. The statement that was made by my colleague over here about us getting together the joint powers. There's a joint powers authority already in place at the county level that works with putting together the different agencies for reducing medical, but it's been closed to the different districts. It needs to be opened up to different districts so the different districts within the county can join the joint powers authority in order to lower the medical and the other cost for the employees. But I think that all of this actually leads to a bigger conversation in education, because there's a bigger conversation that happens around when you talk about teachers and teacher evaluations and the big push that is happening from another level about teachers being evaluated and not having a tenured system and being evaluated based on test scores or being evaluated based on the work they do and the test scores that they're presented from their classrooms, and if that should be happening or not happening. And that's coming from the Michelle Reeses and the people out there that are pushing for that type of reform, which then changes the whole viewpoint on education, because right now our teachers are basically in this system thinking, you know, this is a great job, I'm going to have retirement, I'm going to retire at 65 or less, depending on the amount of years they work. And right now this is shaking up things because it's saying that you might not have that tenure. You might, you know, have to rethink.
Okay, and that has to do with the retirement?
It has to.
Retirement liabilities because?
It has to do with it because these are all topics that are coming into the education world right now and would definitely make an impact on if that retirement is going to be guaranteed or not.
Jeff?
Well, just to comment on insurance pools, and I'll dive into the benefits. CalPERS isn't even big enough. I mean, insurance pools, the way to reduce rates is to have a larger pool, and CalPERS isn't big enough. So I don't think we're going to be very successful at a smaller risk pool as it relates to a countywide piece. As it relates to the three benefits, it's not like global warming in that we know what's going to happen. The actuaries have already forecasted where we're going with this.
What's going to happen?
Unfortunately, the contribution rates have not been set properly, and the differences between PERS and STRS is PERS, the rates are set, contribution rates both for the employer are set by the governing body. Unfortunately, STRS is set in statute. Now, we're struggling right now to recover from this financial disaster, which has gutted a lot of the pension plans. But the key thing is that because STRS hasn't been able to be modified along the way to line itself up with the actuarial plan, because it takes legislation to do that. Okay.
Just didn't want to lose what you were saying. Go ahead. There's races. STRS is set in statute. Yeah. Back up just a second. Go ahead. Yeah.
So in order to change that, there needs to be legislation passed, and no one's had the political will to do that. The reality is that their forecasting could be up to 20% contribution rates to fix PERS, STRS. And so there's, whatever we do as we go through this, certainly using advocacy at the County Office of Ed, is to make sure that school districts aren't hit with a 20% rate off the bat. And it's going to happen not this year because we're in election year, but it's probably going to happen in subsequent years as part of the governor's plan. And with that is to have hopefully we'll have a plan that is phased in over time. But the third item is really the OPEB liability, and these are negotiated. These are local benefits that are negotiated through their bargaining units, and these things include post-employment health benefits primarily. And a lot of districts offer them. It is something they have complete control over, but yet it's very important that they're contributing to their other post-employment benefits. A lot of districts, and we're certainly guilty of that for a while, we're paying as we go and not setting aside. What we're debating right now is to set those dollars aside into a trust in order.
Are you doing that?
We're discussing that. We had a presentation last week, and it's likely to be that way, but I can't speak for the other board members. But what that does is it reduces our accrued liability significantly. But as I mentioned before, this GASB 45 potential change could make a significant change.
GASB 45 isn't a potential change, it is a change. Right?
Well, there's a piece on it that the actuarials, I guess, are still working through, and it has to do with the implicit subsidy as it relates to retiree benefits, and I don't know a lot of the details.
GASB 45 is in place. We've been reporting under GASB 45 now for 6 or 7 years now.
Right, but there's another change that they're proposing with this to change the way that the accrued liabilities is measured. And what will happen with that is if districts haven't been setting dollars aside, they're going to get themselves into trouble, especially as we see a lot of teachers retire because they don't have the funds in order to pay for those accrued that accrued
Okay,
benefit.
so let me ask a question then, and bounce off of that, and maybe just to mix this up a little bit, start with you, Karen. Should the districts be, when they review the budgets, insisting for those that have OPEB liabilities, that they get beyond PAYGO?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question, that they get beyond,
PAYGO.
I don't know what that is.
Ursula, should they be insisting that they get beyond PAYGO?
Yes, they should be insisting.
Why?
Because if you just do pay as you go, then you don't accrue any interest on the funding. So if you're putting into funding, then you can accrue interest, and then you have more of a bank to rely on.
Jeff?
Agree. We're going to see a glut of teachers retire in the age bands, and that there's going to be a huge hit to your pay-as-you-go. And if you haven't been squirreling away dollars in order to pay for those benefits, you're going to find yourself in looking at cutting programs, and that's not fair to students.
Yep, as I said before, I think we're in an age where we're going to have a lot of retirees coming up. And so, in order to pay those costs, where are you going to turn? Hopefully not turn to programs and start cutting where it impacts kids.
I agree.
And may I answer that on pay as you go instead of PAYGO, which I wasn't familiar with, but yes, I absolutely agree that needs to be set aside.
So are your districts, let's start, if you will, Naomi and Karen, since you guys have been inside the district, let's start with Naomi. Is ACOE insisting the budget show PAYGO? Or not show PAYGO, but show amortized payments?
I believe they were when I was there. I think they were insisting upon it. But that was a year and a half back.
Absolutely. One of the things that we have been striving toward is to make sure that we are showing as much as possible in the budget, and actually making sure that for each report that we are not only showing what our expenditures are in the various areas, but that we are getting more accurate about what those expenditures are, which requires a higher level of oversight and planning, which is something we've been shifting.
Ursula, what would you do if you were there in terms of this issue?
Well, I think there needs to be a lot more transparency. I looked over the budget, and there wasn't.
Where did you find it, if I may ask? I just went to the website today, could not find the budget anywhere on the website.
You have to go to
You
the
don't
library.
see it on the website.
And it should be posted.
Why is the ACOE budget not on the website?
I don't know why it's not on the website. I actually asked for it to be posted, so it should be posted.
It seems like it sets a horrible example for the school
Right.
districts.
Right. I had to go to the school board member and ask if I could borrow a copy of the budget that they received
And
in
it's
order
given
to
out
get it.
liberally at our board meetings, but it should be posted on the
Whose
website.
decision
I
is that?
agree. Not to post it? I don't think that there was a decision made. I think that there was
Okay.
whomever's job it was to post it has not posted it.
So getting back to answering the question, or you're
Yeah,
skipping
go
to
ahead.
another question? You got.
I'm sorry, you just triggered something
I know. I did.
that I was very frustrated with earlier today.
Right. That frustrated me as well, only because I wanted to be able to see what was going on with the budget, because that is a major function of this seat. And I did, like I said, I did get a copy of it from a
So let
trustee.
me ask you, setting aside ACOE's budget and moving to other districts, should you be insisting that they show, by the way, does the district ACOE do PAYGO on their OPEB?
Is that-
I don't know the answer to that.
They did as of a year and a half ago, yes.
Did PAYGO?
Yes.
But I don't know whether it was shown or not in.
Yeah, but are they only doing PAYGO?
I can't tell you what they're doing right now.
I think that's what they're doing.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
So you're jumping around, so you want to go to another question
No,
instead
go
of
ahead,
go
go
back?
ahead. You're just triggering.
No, your question, I believe, originally was, what would you do differently if you were in the position?
What would you insist on if you were in the
Right,
position?
so number one, I'd insist the budget be transparent.
And this is for the other districts as well as yours?
Correct.
Yeah, right.
Correct, the budget be transparent, it be easily accessible. I have had many unions come to me and ask me about this very question, because when they get into negotiations, they feel that it provides hostility for negotiations when they get defensive about when they say, we don't have the money to do something, and yet, and they may not have the money, but because it's not transparent, they aren't able to see the budgets to know if that's true or not. So that's definitely something that I agree
Jeff?
require.
Transparency is a huge problem, not only with the budgets, but contracts. I discovered that one of the county board members contracts for space for his company with the superintendent.
Say that what?
One of the county board members contracts, leases property from the county office of Ed for his company.
Who's that?
Ken Barrett. And you wouldn't know that unless you did a public records request, which I did. So part of that, and the concern that I have with that lack of transparency, is that because the agency is sovereign, with the sovereign official with little oversight of the board, all kinds of things could happen. And I think the only way out of this is through transparency. It's also through setting an example. And the county office has a $25 million undesignated reserve. They should take those dollars and put it into a trust. 100% would be ideal, 50% if they want to be a little less risk averse, and demonstrate that that's the proper thing to do for not only your employees, but for the fiscal.
And where should it go?
Pardon?
And where, a reserve for what?
For the OPEB. They should set that example for all the districts to follow.
Yeah.
I was the first one to answer the question way back when, when we started.
Well, we actually sort of modified it back through as to what would you do, I'm sorry, what would you require? Yeah, I agree, we've sort of come full circle. But I was sort of building on it as we were going along, in fairness, yeah, you're right. But I was trying to understand what would you do in terms of requiring transparency along the line?
Well, I mean, I think in order for the county to be truly transparent, we need to get more input on our own district's budget, which we have not done in the past. So when we're talking about our budget for court and community and juvenile hall students, we need to set the example for our districts about really what the LCAP looks like and how to go about soliciting the proper outreach and input for that. Then we also need to be much more stringent upon our own oversight of our own budget.
You want to comment on this?
Sure. The whole idea of having the 25 million reserve, I would hate to see ACOE go to say to the districts, you need to do this, and we're going to put together a trust with this money so that we're covered, because not all the other districts have that option. That's just not there. What I would like to see ACOE doing is saying, we are going to develop, or we are developing, or we have developed a plan where we are going to gradually do this. And we're going to try to set the example. This is how we're going to structure it. These are the steps we're going to ask you to take. And when you provide your budgets to us, I would like you to have another column here talking about how are you going to do this based on the example and the structure that we've given you. That's what I think ACOE needs to be doing. They need to put together the roadmap.
And sort of bounce off of that, bounce off of what Jeff said, and sort of restructure a question that's sort of emerged here, okay? And see what each of you thinks. as I understand it, there's an extra $25 million. I don't know if it's really a surplus because I haven't been able to see the budget.
Right.
Okay, to really examine what this number actually represents. But I gather it's a balance in the fund, is that correct?
Yes, it is a reserve.
It's a reserve.
It is.
Distinct from the balance of the general fund.
That's right.
Is a $25 million reserve.
It's about 23.5.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand what we're talking about. Usually when I look at a general fund budget, it has the starting balance at the start of the year. It has the ending balance at the end of the year. If the budget is structurally balanced, the two numbers match. If it's structurally negative, you've lost money. If it's structurally positive, you've gained money. But there's that starting balance that comes in the ending balance. Sometimes districts have separately a reserve that is apart from the starting and ending balance.
It is separate.
It's separate. What is the starting and ending balance?
For ACOE,
Yeah.
our current balance is 43 and change. I'm not going to remember.
The balance or the
Exactly.
budget?
The budget.
The budget. No, my question is, what's the starting balance and the ending?
Yeah, I don't
What
have
I'm
that in
trying
my
to
head.
understand
I don't have that in
is,
my head.
I
I can get it though. I have it on.
No. But what I'm trying to understand here is money is somewhat fungible, and so what I'm trying to understand is, do you have a $43 million reserve, and you have extra money in your general fund?
23 reserve.
23 reserve. I'm sorry, 23
Yeah.
reserve.
It's not in the general fund.
It's
No.
not in the general fund.
Uh-uh.
So it's basically the general fund starting and ending with a small balance at the beginning and end of the year, so to speak? I mean, it doesn't have extra money built into the balance?
No.
Okay. So there's a $23 million reserve. Okay? Now that we've defined the issue here. And Jeff just suggested it should be part or all of it should go towards paying down.
Just to clarify, I didn't say all of it.
Okay, part of it. Let's start with you. How much of that 23 would you suggest should go to paying down OPEB, and how much of it should go, and where should the rest of it go?
Well, part of it needs to be an investment in our district, so I don't know the exact dollar figures of what the actuarial, the AAL, what it is. But they need to have a plan, a public plan, in order for them to pay that down. And having this undesignated reserve is an opportunity then to demonstrate to the districts that what should be done. The challenge we face is it's not part of, we can't ask districts to add a column to the budget. What they submit to us
We're talking about
I know.
ACOE, right?
I know. Okay, so
Let's not give that a district.
my point is that we're
role model.
a public agency, and this agency needs to provide services to our students and to our districts. We don't need to run excessive balances. I get the idea of having a little extra buffer based on when the economy shifts, but to have such an extensive reserve with no intended purpose does not make sense to me. It should be put to use.
Okay. Taking a one-time, let's go down the road.
I think it's hard to determine what percentage should be set aside at this point when we don't know where the money came from. I'd like to know where the money came from exactly. How did we build up $23 million? And was that at the expense of some services that should have been provided at some time? So certainly I'd like to set an example for our districts and say that we should put a percentage aside. I'm not going to say what that percentage should be, because what I'd like to know is where else do we have gaping holes here? Do we have programs that have been cut? Do we have class sizes that are too high? Have we given raises recently? What other things might have been missing while we were building up this reserve?
So I agree with what Naomi says, but I also would like to go back and look at the budget 2007, 8, 9 and see what was cut. What did we lose? It's basically saying the same thing. It may be in the classroom, it may be the employees, but you get what you pay for. And my feeling is if we cut, let's heal some of those wounds that we caused, not through anything that we did wrong, but just because that's a result of what happened with the economy. So I would like to make sure that some of that goes to healing the wounds.
So a lot of what's happening now is that we are looking at, to use Helen's words, healing the wounds or making things or restoring some of the programs that were cut, but it is obviously with local control funding that there are different parameters to that spending. As far as the 23 million goes, one of the reasons, and we are spending that down in many ways, but one of the reasons a larger, for the past 2 years there have been 2 large one-time health care payments to employees. We realize that this reserve is one-time money, so it's not money that can be put into recurring expenses. So there are expenses that are particularly health care for employees. We just got finished negotiating with the teachers and will soon be negotiating again with CSEA. So some of those reserves are being used for payments in those negotiations. The other thing that you need to know, though, about county offices is that the programs that county offices run are more dynamic in nature. So where there is, I don't know that you can use the word predictability, but where there's certain consistency with particular things that will occur in districts from year to year. A lot of county office programs run on soft money, and that there can be changes in volatility in that in those funding streams, and often what's been required, certainly in the last 2 years, is for us to backfill for programs that had state funding that was cut in the middle of the year, for changes in streams that we'd come to count on. So that's been part of it. The other thing is that counties don't receive the same facilities funding that districts do, so that's the other thing that a lot of these reserve funds have gone to, will go to, is facilities needs.
Ursula.
So I think that if the extra 22 million is supposed to be in reserve for facilities or for whatever it's set out for, that needs to be known. That's the first time I've heard that. So, I think that's something that the public needs to know about. I also think that our unions, especially the classified union, has not had a raise in a while, and that needs to happen so they can be aligned with the districts that have had raises. And I wanted to say that the other thing is within that reserve, if a district goes into receivership under our watch, I believe the county should take a hit as well, because we're the ones that are supposed to be providing that oversight. And if our districts go into receivership, that means that we didn't do our job. Somebody dropped the ball. And I think that the county should take a role in that and have to provide the district some help as far as the funding.
How are they going to do that?
Well, there should be stronger guidelines, though, or stronger. The state should require that the county, if the state's requiring the county's doing the oversight, then the county should be doing that oversight, as opposed to allowing a district under their watch to go into receivership. And that's a huge responsibility that the superintendent is supposed to make sure that doesn't happen. So, if they have this extra fund, if the fund's set aside to assist other, I'm not sure what the fund's set aside for. That's not been told to us, so we're not quite sure.
And then we're going to take a few minutes to get away from finances, and I know we've spent a lot of time on this, but it's kind of mine, Dan Hatfield's feeling that things start with the money, and that that all the discussion of all the great services which we believe very much in is not possible if the district itself doesn't have its fiscal
Right.
house in order,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So hence, so here's the thing, we've talked about a $23 million reserve. We've talked about how it should be used. Jeff has suggested paying down some of the OPEB, and I gather there's a little bit of consensus, at least to hear on that, I'm not sure, over here, okay? To get the benefit of actually showing money in that, you also have to be able to show an ongoing payment.
Yep.
To get the reduction in the discount rate, right?
Well, you have to put it into a trust, yeah.
Put into a trust, not only put into a trust, but that you're feeding the trust.
Yep.
It's not just a one-time thing. So, yes, paying down OPEB is a good idea, but you guys also, most of you at least seem to say, pay-go alone is a bad idea. Yet it doesn't sound like setting, except for that reserve, that there's money in the budget without making sacrifices elsewhere to get away from pay-go. And you want to give raises from it.
Yeah.
Which is contrary to taking that money, if there's not extra money in that budget. Because as you rightly pointed out, that 23 million is a one-time money. So we shouldn't be looking at that in terms of the ongoing expenditures.
Right.
So my question is, from what you've described, there isn't extra money in the budget, right? Aside from that one-time 23 million.
There could be.
How would we know?
That's the concern.
Okay.
We don't know.
So I guess my question is, looking at the budget, which I haven't seen, but maybe you guys have seen. No?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Is there any place what gets given up? You know, if you want to get away from pay-go, and you should get away from pay-go, what do you give up to get away from pay-go? Anyone?
Yes.
Sure.
Right, yeah, sure. Right now, at the county office, they have a higher ratio of administrators to classified staff. So
Higher than what?
higher than what? I'm sorry.
You said it's higher than. Higher
Right,
than
so
what?
it's, okay, so it's almost 3 to 1.
Administrators,
Staff that are listed as certificated and administrative versus the employees,
The classified.
the classified employees.
okay, help me understand what these numbers represent. Anyone want to weigh in?
Sure. I think the number that's been quoted to me, and actually this was quoted to me, so I have not done this investigation on my own, was about 40%.
40%
Of the total, we have about 300 employees.
Yeah.
So about 40% would be considered administrative.
okay.
And by some, the contention is being made that that is too high.
Okay, got it, okay.
What my contention is that you need to compare apples to apples, county office to county office, and not county office to district, because our mission is very
Sure.
different.
Yeah, thank you, now I understand. So let's come backwards for, then, I mean, the County Office of Education has a very administrative function,
Correct,
right?
correct.
So wouldn't you expect there to be a higher number of administrators in the Office of Education versus local school districts?
Versus local school districts, correct,
Are
but
they
if
out
you
of
look
whack with
at,
other
yes,
boards of
that's what I feel,
county
there,
offices of education?
yes,
Do you have data on that?
I can pull it, I don't have it,
I mean, have you, are you?
let me put it this way.
Yeah,
If you were to look at a program that is in the county office, so if you look at SPAS, which is what you're over, I believe. SPAS is the student programs that the alternative schools and all of that, and you were to look at each school level, if you have a school that only has 3 kids in it, right? You have a teacher, you have a principal, you have a director, and then you have a associate superintendent. That's very top heavy versus only you have one classified in there, instructional
I'm sorry,
assistant.
I don't know what it does, but I guess my big picture stepping back would be as county offices of education go, and I don't know the answer to this. I think the proper question would be, is this county of office of education out of whack with other county offices doing, which presumably have the same mandates to provide services to kids in need and at the same time provide oversight functions?
So
The oversight functions that school districts don't provide. I guess what I'm trying to understand is this out of whack?
Yeah, I think it's hard to compare. The county offices operate completely differently as school district. You can't compare the two.
Is it out of whack with other county offices?
You can't even compare county offices because they have different functions and services. Look at Marin County. Marin County has tiny, tiny little school districts. The superintendent serves as the HR director for many of those school districts. Even Santa Clara has small school districts. Contra, Costa. We have large school districts with the exception of 2 in Alameda County.
Good point.
And so the operations are going to be very different.
In other words, it's going to be very different if you're
from
overseeing
county to county.
50 school districts
Right.
within a county versus 5 school districts.
Because you're going to be, at one point, the county office was the IT operations. You know, Karen talked about the not having the same financial system. They had a disaster at the county office, and that all the districts went on their own. They used to run the ROP. They used to run the special ed. All that has gone by the wayside and diminished a lot of the services they provide. You asked about how do you grow the budget. You grow the budget by providing those needed services on a consortia basis. My last job at the county office of ed was running a joint powers agency of 13 counties, and we centered around technology. And so the value proposition is that we can get more out of it if we do it together, but it's got to be a pull and not a push. So there has to be some sales and marketing that goes along with working with the districts to finding out what their needs are and then making sure that you're providing those services for them. And the districts will pay for that.
When did you work at the county office of ed?
And I left in '98.
You were there how long?
3 years.
Okay. So,
I'd answer, I'm just not really sure what the question is.
yeah, and we got a little bit off. Of course, what I'm trying to understand is how do we, coming back to this notion of what what you do with this general fund so that you can meet your OPEB obligations, get beyond pay-go. What do you give up? What are you willing, what do you forego? How do you balance those?
Well, part of it is right-sizing the services, right? The service offering and making sure that. Sorry.
So, in education, we always try to keep the money as close to kids as we can. We're trying not to take away from kids. What we want to do is, if there's going to be cuts, we try to keep it as far from the classroom as we can. With that said, I think that the anomaly of the $23.5 million is something that, because it's not ongoing money, that's going to be something that I would set aside for right now and say, we are the county office, we need to model and we need to put together a roadmap for what we can do and what everyone else in the county can do as well in terms of this unfunded liability and how we can address it. So I can't say as ACOE, but guess what? We've got $23.5 million that you don't have that we can pull from. I wouldn't do that. What I would do is say, let's figure out a way to do this. And you're asking, where's it going to come from? Most likely it's going to come from the employees' checks, because they're the ones that will eventually benefit from it. So that's what has to be crafted by the state of California. That's what they're driving the bus. We're going to have to respond to it, but it's not as though it's going to grow on trees. That's where that money's coming from. It will eventually affect the person that will eventually be the beneficiary of it, and that's kind of the way benefits work. So I don't see that there's any other source. And once again, as I say, we want to keep it as far away from the kids as we can. And so it would be my hope that we are not cutting programs to do this and cutting services to kids, that the people that will benefit will be the ones, and I'm part of CalSTRS. I would understand it if someone said to me, listen, we're just not pulling our fair share here, you're going to need to add some more to this fund. That's the way it works.
I think it's a difficult question because since I haven't seen a budget, since it's not transparent and on the website, how do we know that there's not any wiggle room here? We're going about the question assuming that the beginning balance and the ending balance are close. So I think that if we did a really good analysis of the budget, we might actually see that it's not close, and there might already be some wiggle room in there where we can start, forward planning and putting some money aside. I think we're working on a huge assumption here.
So what I can say is that we're making those difficult decisions right now when there are decisions being made about at the bargaining table, for example, during negotiations. If we're choosing to...
You're in negotiations with the county office employee.
Exactly.
Ed employees.
Right. There are two primary unions there. So when we decide with our employees through negotiations what we're going to prioritize, there are some other things that obviously are not going to be prioritized. So, even now, those are those conversations that we're having about what programs are essential, right? Obviously, as a county office of ed, we are mandated to provide certain services. And then there are other things that are funded on soft money. If we don't have money for them, they go away. That's how that works.
Have you done for your core programs a long-range financial forecast?
Core programs being student programs and services.
The things that aren't the soft money.
Yes. Yeah,
What does the future look like?
well, considering that we're shifting to local control funding formula, we've had several budgeting sessions, particularly around spas. And the future, it depends on ADA. It depends on the number of students we're able to serve. So if we can, and this is what we just negotiated with teachers, though I'm not at liberty to talk details, but if we can reach a critical mass of students in each classroom, as well as instructional assistants, then we will be able to replicate, which will allow us to move forward with many of the programs that we have in student programs and services.
If I ask you for your 5 or 10-year projected budget, does such a document, a spreadsheet exist?
3 to 5, yes. 5 to 10, no.
Okay. 3 to 5. Let's say there's a 3 to 5 year. Is it 3? Is it 5?
It's definitely 3. We're making some assumptions that we think will carry us 5 years out. So I think I would, 5 years I feel comfortable saying. One of the things that...
So there's a spreadsheet that exists that shows 5 years out?
It is, but it's not, it's a budget projection sheet. That's what it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
every public
Absolutely.
agency-
Every SPA staff came together to begin looking at this. I'm sorry, the acronyms are tough. Student Programs and Services,
Okay.
SPA.
Okay, so if you projected it out 5 years, when you project it out 5 years, do you project it out assuming pay growth?
I'd say yes. That was not one of the variables, though, in the scenario. We look at teachers' salaries, for sure, and what's likely to happen in terms of STRS and PERS. And we are not looking at a particular set-aside, but so I guess in the absence of that set-aside, we're looking at pay-as-you-go.
Yeah, okay, so, and does that 5-year projection show that you guys will be, do you build in raises into that 5-year projection?
Yes.
Do you show a structural surplus or deficit in future years? or a break even?
A break even is what we're showing right now.
How far out?
3 years for sure. There's still some, in terms of how the funding is going to roll out with the local control funding formula, there's still some questions to be answered. Counties are made whole in a shorter time than districts. So
you're
we'll be
projecting
making
out, and in that break even, you also presumably have CalPERS pensions for some employees? Or are you all STRS?
No.
For student programs and services, there's predominantly STRS, but yes, there's also PERS because there's classified staff.
Have you built into your PERS projections their actuarial changes?
I can't say, that specifically. I mean, they are definitely in this 5-year plan, but in terms of the actuarial details of what's been factored in, those numbers were brought to me, so.
May I add something here? So having done years of negotiations, I have to say that when you're sitting at the table with the teachers union or one of the classified unions, the ACOE or a district could say, listen, we really need to do this. I mean, this is unfunded. We need to have you guys give here. It just doesn't happen that way. Negotiations don't happen like that. Even if you've got interest-based bargaining going on, people don't willingly say, I really want to give up part of my salary to make sure that in the future I'm going to be able to get what I think I deserve. That's why I asked who's driving this bus. Part of the reason that it needs to come from the state is because when it's legislated, then it's not really bargainable. It's something we have to do. It has to go into those projections. We have to fund it, and therefore it gets done.
So you're saying the state has to mandate?
The state or legislate. It has to be legislated.
Let me see if I understand what you're saying. In order to build into the budget projections something beyond pay-go is going to require the state to legislate that.
I would say realistically, yes. Now, you could have a CBO who says, listen, I'm going to do 2 balance sheets here, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you what it looks like here, but really this is what we're working from. I mean, there's all kinds of possible scenarios, but I think when it comes right down to getting this done, when you're at the negotiating table, which is, people are 80% of the budget in any school district or ACOE, that is what needs to happen to make sure that everybody's on the same page and we are doing this and making sure that it happens.
Yes.
Comment. There's no district that builds in the assumptions of STRS or PERS. They just don't do it. It's not required. But every district, including county office, will do a 3-year multi-year projection. It's required under AB 1200. And they're going to build in the assumptions that the industry standards, a lot of it comes from school services, a lot of it comes from the director of finance, some assumptions that they build into the budget. But no one's including OPEB. And there's no requirement to include OPEB in your budgeting process. You're required to account for it, but you're not required to set aside dollars for it. And that's the problem. Now, I don't agree that the state should legislate this. This is a local bargained issue, and I make the distinction between PERS and STRS and OPEB. The OPEB that we're talking about, and I think we're all know what I'm talking about, is having to do with post-employment benefits that the district negotiates. That's what they have absolute control over. So because of the requirement, the districts need to set aside and forecast that, and because it's not required, a lot of them don't. And so it's this growing liability.
Okay, so I'm talking specifically the County Office of Education. Should the County Office of Education be building into their budget going forward?
Absolutely.
The full arc.
What's
the
left?
Full arc.
They should. They should have a plan to get there, and they should have an open conversation, both publicly and with employees, of how they're going to pay for it.
Anyone else want to comment on that before we wrap it up? Anyone disagree with that? Anyone agree with that?
I don't disagree.
I don't disagree.
And here's what I'd say. I agree with the fact that we need to be having this conversation. I agree with the fact that there need to be multiple voices, but as we were talking before about also the need to prioritize, it needs to be made holistically, looking at the other unfunded liabilities as well as other costs of operating that we have. So I think that that is the right thing to move toward.
If you look at the other unfunded liabilities,
STRS so
no, which ones, I just wanna make sure what you meant when you said.
STRS, the ones we are talking about,
STRS
the
and
question you led with, you talked about
Yeah.
three, and I'm
The
talking about
difference,
STRS
the
and
difference
PERS.
between OPEB and STRS and PERS is, in PERS case, you are already paying towards that
Yes.
unfunded liability because it's built into your payments. In STRS case, you are
As well.
arguably paying a fairly fair contribution
Right.
towards it, and arguably you may be asked to pay more, but that one really isn't under your control while this negotiating is going on. But in terms of OPEB, with all due respect, it's entirely under your control.
So I don't think that changes my answer.
Okay.
You know, I still believe that it needs to be a holistic decision as to when and how much, and conceptually, I absolutely believe that it's the right way to go.
Folks, thank you.